It took years, decades, in fact, before I actually made the move to start being a professional storyteller. But that's what I'm doing today, and I continue to do, and I'm very proud of the stuff that we do.
I think it's also important to connect the dots of when, when we go to the theater now, and we look at an audience, we won't see a lot of people of color in the theater, depending on the production. I was just at MJ, and the theater was much more diverse, and it also opens up the door again for more people to want to be involved in this endeavor, right? Producing, directing,
Absolutely.
whatever the case may be. Um,
Oh, can I just
what
say
do you,
one quick thing that you did make me
yeah.
remember? And that is, I did this production in New York called Thoughts of a Colored Man.
Hmm.
It was my first time I was a lead producer for a show. And what I used to love to do before the curtain went up, I would love to go to the lip of the stage and look up and out into the audience and see something that I'd never seen before and have not seen since. 75 to 95% of the faces in that audience were Black people. I love standing in at the exit as people were leaving and like, I hope you had a good time. I hope you enjoyed it, blah, blah, blah. I met so many young people, particularly those who are 16, like 30, who had never seen a Broadway show ever before that night. And so I was lucky enough to give them that introduction. I also wanted to tell them this is not all of Broadway, though, let's be clear.
Yeah.
But this is an opportunity of what Broadway can do. It can not only allow us to see ourselves, but it can allow other cultures to learn more about us. And then we can start working on basically breaking down racism and all the other isms that plague us. Sorry.
When you are with the producer hat on, right? What kind of roadblocks do you think you hit, and how many are they just because it's a difficult job to do and bringing a production to stage, or does how much does you being a Black man play into it?
Well, that's actually a very good question because as a Black producer who does shows that are from cross cultures, I often hear from people, especially when it comes to Black plays, less so for Black musicals, but plays that feature Black stories in general tend to attract fewer audience members who are white. We as Black people will go see our stories, whether they're plays or musicals. And so the challenge is when I talk to producers and they will say this, I've heard this so many dozens of times. Well, the story, it just doesn't feel commercial. I just
Mm.
don't be able to make money, right? And so then it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy because, if I don't find enough funders to actually create the thing and bring it to the stage, it won't ever be seen, not on the Great White Way. So for me, as a Black producer who produces stories of a wide array of cultures, I find that I get pushback because folks feel like the thing that really is going to be more commercial is going to be singing and dancing. Everybody loves Black folks singing and dancing. Everybody, everybody, everybody. Black plays, not so much. But our stories sometimes are best told just through spoken word, not through music. Others are a beautiful storytelling model through music, others are not. So for me, it's coming up against that roadblock. Well, I don't think it's just going to be that commercial enough. And I shy away.
And it's
So
an
I
interesting,
was very excited. By the way, last thing,
yeah, of course.
all the investors and producers that I brought on for Thoughts of a Colored Man were all African Americans except for one. None of them had ever invested in Broadway until they invested in that show. And it's because of them, Gala being, that's right, amongst them, that show even came about. And
So
so,
how do we, well, I mean, a lot of it is reach, right? How do we reach the person that might be willing to invest, right? Because if you think of it as the Great White Way, that might not be a space for me, right? That might not be a space for me to invest.
that's right.
Maybe, how do we reach people and let them know not only is this, a place for you, but it's a place that you can recoup or possibly even just see what you've done reach a Tony level win.
Mhm. So yeah, for me, I believe that the most effective way is the
Yeah.
same way that we get more butts in seats, which is word of mouth. We as a culture, we are Black people, we love to talk. And what do we talk? We talk, we sit in the kitchen, and I spent so many conversations at my grandmother's house in the kitchen talking. We talk at the water cooler. How many times have you been somewhere and some friend of yours said, girl, let me tell you what I saw last Saturday? It's called Falsified Color Man. It was so good, blah, 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 blah. In the same way, let me tell you what I am helping to do to move the needle on changing the world and just having our stories be told from an authentic point of view. And it is through this person. It doesn't have to necessarily be me. There are other Black producers who are now in the circle, but it's important for us to support our own storytelling because if we don't do it, then it'll happen, not to the same degree and maybe not to the same level of authenticity because of who the mouthpiece is for that particular production, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And also creating, and what part of what you also do is mentor producers, right?
Yes.
Of color, is to create more producers in that area, in that arena, so that they can be the person that's ushering the project forward. All right.
That's
Are
right.
you seeing more and more people wanting to seek, you know, to become theatrical producers?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the things is that, as I said before, myself and for me and another person came on Broadway, there were no professional Black producers whose mission and job was to tell stories through producing. So most people didn't even know you couldn't even know a Black producer. Most people don't even know producers, period. But
Right.
very few people knew Black producers because there were only two of us. So unless you know one of us, you don't know any. Do you know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
So the challenge is, to your point, which is to get the word out that here, ladies and gentlemen, is an opportunity for us to get behind our stories told by our mouthpieces. And here's a chance for us to make a change because how many times have we gone, you know, when I grew up, Black faces on film, television, they weren't that plentiful. You know, we're making progress, we continue to make progress, but
Mhm.
when we were actually able to see ourselves represented on stage like I saw in Dreamgirls, I was mind blown. So many Black people who have come to my shows and said, wow, this is so beautiful. And, you know, this is the first time I've ever been to a Broadway show, right? Because people forget that Broadway is only about 10% of the population has ever seen or will likely see a Broadway show. The other 90% will not. And part of it, I think, in a community is that we feel, to your point, that it's not for us. They don't tell our stories. That's not what we do. But that's exactly what I do. And that's exactly what a number of other people who I'm mentoring do as well. So
Yeah.
if your thing is, maybe it's women of color, you know, because Gayla mentioned that that's part of what her mission is to make funds more available for women of color, as well as me. 8 of the 9 mentees that I have are Black women, right? And they're
Yeah.
all looking for resources of all types, you know, making networks, talking to people. And how we get a hold of people, how we spread the word is I go to my network and I ask my network to introduce me to their network. And when I get people in that network registered, I ask them to introduce me to their network. And so these concentric circles happen. And that is how I meet more and more people to get the word out that it's possible to be a producer or an investor on Broadway or feature film because
Yeah.
most people did not have a clue didn't know how it even worked, let alone that they could do it because no one had ever asked.
Yeah, I want to make sure that if anybody wants to ask a question, definitely raise your hand. I think you don't even have to like click raise hand anymore if you have the new Zoom update. Throw it in the chat. We'll ask anything you want. Um, I wanted to follow up with that with a question about Gayla, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Amani had something she was going to share.
Oh, Amani, please. I don't see a raised hand, so.
Oh, I have lots of things to share, but I thank you so much, Ron, for being here and for talking with all of us. I am an actor and writer. I'm currently completing my PhD at Stanford in theater and performance studies, and I'm starting a job at Pomona next year as a theater histories and dramaturg professor. And so I'm super fascinated in everything you're saying. It rings so true. Um, and I'm sort of writing my dissertation on the quality of representation of Black women on these major commercial stages. And I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more to your experience regarding what sounds to me like a pipeline issue. Because we're talking about people who don't even know that these opportunities exist. They can't start preparing at a very young age. And then also, I would love it if you could speak to this a little bit more about this idea of like authenticity and sort of the diversity of Black experience, right? Because I don't want to, there are certain creators who like don't necessarily represent like an authentic Black experience that I relate to, and like we're not a monolith. So I wonder how you approach that pushback, because I know that people want to see people be a certain type of way, right? And so what your sort of practiced response might be to scenarios like that.
Well, I believe a lot of people do want to see stories that have not been told. Like the motto of my company is tell every story. So what I do when I meet new people, first, and I'm talking about the work that I do, I share my enthusiasm because I am so moved by the stories that I find that are so compelling that the excitement just flows out of me when I talk to people. And because I tell people all the time, people like writers, like such as yourself, directors, if you're going to talk to someone about your project, you have to show that you are enthusiastic about it. Because if you're not enthusiastic about it, then you should expect me to be enthusiastic about it. Because you're just like, oh, let me tell you about this. And I'll be like, okay, that's great about that, and keep it moving. But the offering to say, I'm telling stories that have not been told before, or we're telling stories that have been told through a different lens. I think of, for example, for Color Girls that I produced on Broadway, right? It had been produced by, it's like in 45 years. Do you know how many times The Crucible has been on Broadway? You know, over the years? I mean, there are these other, and I consider For Color Girls as an integral part of the American theater canon as any other show. And we find these people, and by we I mean me and my team, people like Camille A. Brown, who is a choreographer and a dancer, and she made her debut as a director on a show where she was both a director and a choreographer on a show. The first Black woman to do so in 65 years. So that just does not happen. So if you care about the kind of people telling your stories, people like Camille, and that those people are at the helm creatively, you should come talk to me or a number of other producers, because many of us are trying to tell those stories, and we are always looking for support in that endeavor. And it's always not necessarily all about money, mind you, but often that's the thing that gets us off the ground so that we can continue to move forward, right? That's the second question. What was the first question again?
Oh, I was also just curious about the pipeline issue that you were.
Yes, that is so, you put your finger on the pulse. Because see, even for me, I didn't start lead producing until a few years ago. I was co-producing. I won't go into details now unless people want to. Later on I will. But the point of the matter is that I was in that pipeline. I just kind of pushed my way in, right? I was invited by Tamara Tooney and Wendell Pierce to be their representation on a particular show back in the day, August Wilson's final play for Broadway. And that's how I got in. And so I put my foot in the door. Once I got my foot in the door and I opened the door, now I'm trying to hold the door open for others to come through. But it does take time. People don't just wake up and now you're an incredible producer. You need the experience, you need the background, you need the resources, you need to have a great Rolodex, you need to be driven, because this is hard work, and it's made only harder for people of color, because Black folks, we will find that we get such pushback, not only because, oh, it's not commercial enough, but because people have something prettier or shinier or something else that might be interesting to them. And sometimes it's not even really about Broadway. They're just doing any number of things, because we all can put our money in any number of resources to any number of sources. So for us, the challenge is to find people who have the vision or hold the vision that we do, that we can change the culture and the complexion of Broadway and film, et cetera, if we stand up and be counted, which is to say, we put our money where our mouth is, or we put our time where our mouth is. So we don't just talk, right? We are actually doing something to make a difference and make a change.
Awesome. Rodney, you wanted to ask a question?
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Ron. I mean, this is you're giving us a lot of gems, and thank you for the work that you've been doing in the trenches. One of the points that I wanted to make was, and you talked about this in terms of the pipeline, is really looking at ecosystems and the networks that we have. And I've dropped in the chat the Black Theater Coalition, and so I just wanted to know what your
on the Zoom
suggestions or recommendations might be in terms of us really networking and not feeling like we're out there by ourselves, because oftentimes we're going out there and we're trying to get our work produced, and we feel like we're the only ones out there doing it ourselves. But there is an ecosystem, there is a network out there, but oftentimes we're not connected. We don't know what the other one is doing. And is there a forum where these different organizations and agencies are coming together and sharing best practices? And how do you begin to really take that network to the next level? Because we're doing things and we have the capacity amongst ourselves, but we're isolated, I feel.
I agree. I assume you're a theater professional. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, so to speak. Exactly.
Okay. Well, no, your point is well, because you know what, I'm going to tell you that is being able to network is so important, because it was very lonely for me for a number of years, right? Because it was me, running my own thing by myself, and another producer running them by themselves. More and more every year, more and more networks are coming about. For example, there's like a Black Men on Broadway, organization, which, you Google. And so there are these Black men who are professionals who work on Broadway, and they, we have dinners, lunches, coffee meetings, socials, what have you, so that you can be in the same room, because sometimes that's all you really need. You need to be in the room with people who are trying to do either what you're trying to do or are motivated by what you're trying to do. And that is so important. I really want to set up a Black producers conclave, right? Because I think we face particular kinds of obstacles that others simply do not. So my hope and my goal is that as we continue to expand the numbers, we will start to coalesce around organizations that allow us to support one another. Because it's true, I know places where I can find money, or I have resources that I know people might care about. I know not-for-profits that do funding in the area, and someone else may not know that, and vice versa. So I would love to be able to create more of those. There aren't very many, but there are some, and they're growing as more people come into the market.
That's such an important point, because it goes to the theory of building your own table and asking people to come sit at that table with you, right?
Absolutely.
Right. That's right.
Thanks for sharing.
Of course. Thanks for the question. I appreciate you.
So, Ron, let's talk. We have about a half hour left, a little more than that, but I just want to make sure, until somebody else has another question. What's the best way to support you? We are working together. You're one of our fellows. We are a resource for you. But what about some of the people on this meeting? How could they support you?
Well, I think part of it will be awareness that there is a company called SimonSays Entertainment that is out there telling the kinds of stories that we're telling. So going to our Facebook page or our Instagram page and encouraging others to follow us on our social media platforms is a good thing. Of course, to buy a ticket to whatever the event is or the production is du jour that year would be very helpful. I have opportunities for people who want to donate money to the cause, people who want to invest money in the cause, people who want to lend money to the cause. So if from the financial point of view, there are many different ways we can crack that nut. And as I said, from the beginning, that's where you have to start. Because if you're going to create a Broadway show and you have to start it usually out of town, to get it from page to stage, it's about $250,000 to $300,000 investment, right? And that's for every show that you do, right? So every time that you start a new show, you have to go out and raise a ton of money. So in addition to the financial resources that we need and could help by anyone on this call, and if you donate, you can donate. Gayla will tell you, if you want to donate $100, you can donate $100 because Gayla
And I'm going to put the link in the chat where people can put that $100.
Okay, please do.
So is that the delusion, not delusion, but is that the thinking that if you only want to give $100, that it's not enough and it's not worth it? So we can dispel that.
I say that you want to give something that you feel is significant for you, whatever that is, right? If it feels like, I'm not trying to take away from your tithing. Trust me, I'm not. Or you do what you need to do and God got you, right? But for those people who really want to make a difference, do something and go a little bit out of your comfort zone, because that is where you will be able to find, and we will be able to find, the greatest support for us to move our projects forward. And as I said, there's so many different ways to give your time. So follow, and hey, I'll give you my email address if you want to stay in touch. I'm happy to do another Zoom, for example, with people in your network. If you say, hey, you know what, I'm gonna bring 8 or 10 of my friends from church, or 8 or 10 of my friends from my sorority or fraternity, or whatever that is that I move in social circles where I think people might be moved by this, then hey, I will come there. I will show up. I bet I can get Gayla, and I don't know, maybe even Victoria too. I'm just saying. They're very busy ladies, but I'm just saying, I certainly can do that.
Yeah,
Talk to
no,
us
we'd
ab-
be
oh,
there. And
sorry, go
I
ahead.
love that I love that
No,
we're talking about this because I always thought like, I'll buy a ticket, right? Like I'm gonna go to the theater. I'm gonna, take, friends. We're gonna go see this play. We're gonna go see this movie. I remember back in the day, and I don't know that it really happened, but I remember I would leave like my television on if there was a black show because I was just like, oh, the Nielsen's gonna pick up that. Like, I know that wasn't really what happened, but I was just like, I just wanted to be known that like we will watch, our programming. But this is a really good conversation because it's more than just buying the ticket and getting to the theater. There's so much more of how we need to think about supporting and uplifting our brothers and sisters like yourselves who are trying to get these stories out there. So.
Don, you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question for Ron, which is also about finance. So I primarily work in the area of film and TV. One thing that a lot of people aren't aware of is that a lot of film productions get financed because of the sort of tax programs that exist around film and TV. And those same programs exist around Broadway, specifically what's called Section 181 of the U.S. Tax Code. At my company, Filmheads, we started to do a lot more of that. It's a way of equity investing, but to get a tax deduction as opposed to the returns. Long story short, we are making a lot of headway into now doing this for Broadway as well. And I'm curious to know if that is helpful to you. If you're familiar with that program, if not, happy to have a call after and to talk about it more thoroughly.
Oh, it is absolutely integral, actually, because I just not very many, and it's been a couple of months. Wow, it's actually ended last year. I got word that the tax credit is coming in for "Ain't Too Proud," which was my Temptations musical piece, and there's one that's coming in for Colored Girls. And what that does is it enables investors to know that if the show doesn't necessarily recoup from just the ticket sales on Broadway, monies can come back to them through the tax credit that the state offers. So, and we will do with another show, Sugar Hill, we are essentially selling our tax credit, at a discount because of course they want to make money for giving us the money. And that brings down the amount of equity that we have to raise because we will have the money by selling the tax credit before the tax credit even hits, right? Which is a boon, I think, for investors, but certainly for producers, because it means that we can go out and raise maybe $1 million less than we could because someone bought the tax credit and we can use that towards the capitalization of the show. So it is absolutely key to my job as on Broadway as it is for film and television. So your point is very well taken. It's very, very important. And people who are interested in how money can come back. Because one of the things I want to say quickly, because I know we're running out of time, but, people don't quite always understand that a show on Broadway, for me, is step one. It's not the golden ring. There's a long tail that could happen by a Broadway show, because after the show premieres on Broadway, then it might go on tour in the United States, or it might go on tour to the UK. There might be a film that's generated from that. There might be a television show. And all of those are pockets of money that come about because of the profile increase because the show was on Broadway. So there are many, many ways over a number of years where money can flow back to investors and equity partners. So that's important to know as well. It's not just the end game. It is, for me, a step along the path that is a long path for years to come. For example, Sugar Hill is an evergreen project, right? It has to do with the Nutcracker, which is a holiday favorite. we were at Chicago last year. They want us to come back this year. They want this to be their holiday offering, right? That's a show that can go on ad nauseum. It can go on for years and years and years. So for me, it represents the most lucrative possibility for me of any show in my 13, 14, 15-year career as a producer, right? And those are the kind of things you want to ask when you start to look into the space. Really educate yourself or talk to someone who knows so that you can see and avoid the pitfalls that others might not know were there.
And you could also bring that to different cities as well, not just have it. Yeah, that's the genius about that production.
Yeah, we're going
Right.
to go 18, we're going to do a China tour, 18 weeks in the fall, right? We're looking
Right.
at Europe, we're looking at Australia, we're looking at, so it will just be able to expand and grow because that is going to be, trust me when I tell you this is going to be the next big dance extravaganza on the international scale. Like, I don't know if you live in New York, you may see these signs every year. I think it's called Shenyun or Shenyun. I can't remember.
Yes, yeah, I know
Every
exactly what you're talking
year, I see them posters up at the bus
Yeah.
stops and
Right.
every single year. Why? Because they are making money, because they are coming back, because people like to see that. And not just for the Asian, community. I mean, it's a great show. Same thing with us. In our show, there's the jazz by this 16-piece orchestra is some of the most beautiful sounds that you will ever want to hear. And then you have these 23 dancers on stage who are doing Lindy, they're doing ballet, they're doing street dance, they're doing it never is boring. There's not a boring moment in that show. So it's a crowd pleaser. And what makes it really, really attractive, it doesn't require translation to any other languages. We can drop this anywhere. The only thing that you hear in English are some songs, a few songs. But other than that, dance is the language of that piece. Dance is the language that's
That's amazing. You guys are going to China with them.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. They want us to come back next year too. And we haven't even opened the first show yet, right? So I'm like, let's do it.
That says it all.
You said such an interesting thing because, like, when picking a project, I often hear storytelling and people considering stories moving from a story that's about struggle, right? A history of our struggle, right? Versus a celebration or success. And music really can live in that space beautifully of maybe it evokes pain, maybe it evokes celebration. Do you sort of, when you're picking projects, have that kind of question in your mind, where will this land?
Oh, of course. Absolutely. Like for Colored Girls, the show, if you've seen For Colored Girls in the past, and I don't know any Black women that went to college that at somewhere in their life has not read For Colored Girls, okay?
Right.
And by the way, the title is For Colored Girls Consider Suicide When the Rainbow is Enough, is not enough. That's just, I'd say that based on me, because I met her, we talked. Anyhow, that show, if you had seen it, has often been portrayed as a story about pain and degradation, and it's such a heavy story. But Camille found the celebration of sisterhood in that show that was so uplifting. Tanya Pinkins, who's a Tony Award-winning actress, stopped me as she was walking out of the theater and said, "Ron, thank you. I was not looking forward to coming and see this show, but I want to come and support you." He said, but she found the humor. She found the celebration. She found the joy that most productions never even see. So yes, I look for those kinds of things. I feel like there's nothing against the slave narrative. We can't forget the slave narrative, what happened in this country. But unless you are bringing something very unique about that story in that slave narrative, I've seen enough. It's like I've seen enough, drug dealers, who are trying to make it on the way in Chicago and DC and hey, there still are stories to be told there. But as a general genre, I would prefer to find stories that, like I said, I haven't seen told, that can expand the conversation about Black culture. Because someone said, I think it may be Victoria, we're not a monolith. None of us are. So we want to explore everything of who we are.
Yeah. When Ron came to me with For Colored Girls and to invest and support it, it was so timely too, in terms of all the issues they were talking about, like Roe versus Wade, being repealed, mental health, suicide in this country coming out of COVID, right? Like all of these topics were just so relevant, and yet were done in a beautiful way that I could walk out of the theater without not always having to be manipulatively depressed.
Mhm.
I could come
Yes.
out with some hope and candor.
Preach.
Well, I think that's a really good point, because I think you can have something that has a struggle or a painful narrative, but if it takes you on a journey, right, and you come out exalted, inspired, it then pushes it forward. Then that's where that word of mouth comes in, right? You see people talk about, when I went to see the piano lesson, right?
Mhm.
That's with, right? I left there just, astounded by what I had just watched, and I was able to then push it forward and share it. And that's another part of how we pay it forward, right? We talk about it, like you said, we post about it, right? I want to ask you one more thing, because I don't want to run out of time. You talked briefly about the grants process in getting funding. That's a arduous lift sometimes, right? Do you find there are ways to navigate that are easier than others? Do you find it to be give you what you need?
Well, here it is. I refer to that. I think a lot of people do it as soft money, money that you don't have to pay back because it's a donation. And it really depends upon the grantor, right? And they tend to be smaller amounts. They don't tend to be, $1 million. Unless, of course, the Mellon Foundation, who, by the way, if you're looking for money, they are giving it away. So if you are in that process of looking for some cash, reach out to the Mellon Foundation, just saying. But it really depends on the particular grantor, right? The grantor, you have these, hoops you got to jump through, and that's fine. All kinds of data that you need to share with them before they would provide you with funding. But you should always look for funding for support, if not in the capitalization phase of your production, but in the outreach phase of your production. Darren Walker is so good about buying out a house for, a production that I did to bring young kids of color, at-risk youth, to come see a show that they would never see at that phase in their life, that age, right? Because they just don't have the resources, or they're just not aware, right? If I want, for every show that I do, every single show that I do, I want young people to come in and be able to experience it, because one of the things that we are struggling with on Broadway is, ticket sales. Yes, it's better than COVID, but it's not as good as it could be. Part of that problem has been exacerbated because the core ticket buying audience for decades was white women between 50 and 70. Well, that population is dead, dying, or just not coming to the theater as much because COVID, and they just pulled back. The future of Broadway sits in the hands of young people. So that's why the kind of shows that I do have one of three characteristics. They're celebrity driven. They have a brand that people know. For example, Soul Train, the hippest trip in town, the Soul Train musical, right? And the third one is cheap. So the least expensive, because it's a hell of a lot easier to recoup $2 million than $27 million. And I have shows that live in both of those camps right now. So yes, I think granting is a process that everyone who cares about this and is in search of money should always go out and talk to major corporations or foundations to get them to support the work that you do. And again, how fast or how arduous that process is completely dependent upon the grant.
Yeah. I'm going to throw this out to the group and say, what show, if anybody's seen any show and wants to share a story about a show that they've recently seen. But you and I were talking about MJ last night, and I talked about that experience of being in that theater, and like right in the middle of the orchestra was like a sorority. They all had on their sweatshirts, and we were doing callbacks, and tears were cried, laughing. It was such a powerful, collective, unique experience, because you can't do it again. You can't get it again, right? It's like lightning in a bottle for that moment.
That's right. That's
And
right.
I think most importantly, it's because it was music of my youth. it was a Black experience watching those three young boys who played Michael throughout his time, and Miles Foster, who was Michael. To see that excellence on stage was overwhelming. Not just the music, right? Not just the story. It was overwhelming. And are you seeing more and more productions? I can think now of, Six was multicultural, right? Piano Lesson was multicultural. It's really starting to change. It's really starting to pick up, would you say?
It is, yes, I would say that that's true. And then I mean, and I don't, for me, it's a very fertile ground now for finding other producers who aren't Black, but who are interested in change and collaborating with them on work, because there are people out there who are not just chasing a dollar. Because if your mission is to become a multi-millionaire by putting your money into a Broadway show, I think you need to have a sit down, we'll have a conversation and a cocktail, and we'll talk about that. Because for me, I put my money and time and resources into projects that I think are going to be quality, but have the potential to change the world. They have some social impact capacity to them. Do you know what I mean? It's not just jazz hands, jazz hands, jazz hands. There's something underneath it, right? And so for me, that is why it's important to find other people who are like, who care about that kind of thing. I'm seeing Ethan here, right? Ethan Board. Hello, Ethan. It's good to see you. Right. Like Ethan, though, he cares about such things, right? He is aware of them. That's why he's on this call, right? And I just wanted to say very, Amani, that was so great that you really appreciated that there was a pregnant woman on stage for Colored Girls. That's just she performed that show 9 months pregnant, danced.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Amazing. Extraordinary.
So, Gayla, do you have a show that you've seen recently that inspired you? And we're going to wrap up soon, so I don't want to leave. If anybody wants to drop a note or say hello, please feel free to unmute yourself or jump on camera and do so.
And I just want to say thank you, by the way, to you guys for caring. Thank you so much for this initiative. Thank you for selecting me as a fellow, but thank you for the work that you're doing to diversify the spaces. You are such a godsend. And so thank you for all the work that you do. You two
Thank you. Thank
really
you. And yeah, Amani said A Strange Loop floored her. Yeah, A Strange Loop was it was breathtaking. It was breathtaking. Yeah, it was breathtaking.
The story that you had not seen before.
No, I mean, but that was the bravery of that, right? That was a story we had never seen, told in a way we've never seen, with elements and story beats in it that I don't know if we'll ever see again. It was brave. It was brave.
I agree.
I'm going to toss it to you, Gayla, if you want to take us out.
Yeah, happy to. So I put in there the thoughts of for Colored Girls was the last powerful one that I saw. But Ron, thank you so much for opening your world to us. Before meeting you, I did not know any Broadway producers. I just bought my tickets, collected my playbooks, and put them in a drawer so I'd have a bunch of them to remember. But you've really opened my eyes, and I want with this group on the call here to really collectively, if we can think about how we as a group can keep to ensure that there's quality shows on stage for us. And I don't necessarily have the answer. I think part of it is just we've got to start moving capital, whether it be our own capital, whether it be getting grants to, whether it's, getting you access to our networks and things.
Or the corporations.
Building that pipeline, right? Maybe some of you guys are at corporations that provide grants and funding or can buy tickets for a block of clients and customers, things like that, right? Like I want us to get really creative of what all that could look like for you. And I'm so glad that the people on this call are, I believe, the right people to help figure that out in there. Dr. Stacy, I saw you come on camera for a minute, and can you just move over a little bit so people can see back? Can people see this?
I love that.
Yes, faithpreneur. I love that. Yes.
When we talk about Black storytelling, we are a faithful spiritual people. So I love that and I feel like we need to just have a Zoom where we just showcase you. And I'd love for everybody to come back for that lunch and learn because how we tap into and speak to
Mm.
and engage through the Black churches. I'm really curious how you're doing that work, Stacy.
First, Gayla, I just want to say I had to do a little multitasking. I have an event today, but I was listening to you and Victoria cue up what we're talking about with Ron. Ron, I love this idea. Like, these are the things that make my belly leap, right? When we're doing amazing things and sharing that out with the world. And the whole network, and yes, we can talk about it because I literally have to jump into another prep for tonight. But Faithpreneurs, it's an opportunity for us to stand unapologetically in our faith, right? We can call out everything else in the world. And I know I'm not crazy because there has been proof in the marketplace that God gave me this Destiny Designers University for faithpreneurs. So I felt like Noah building an ark when nobody saw any water. They were like, what you talking about, Noah? And what you building over there? So that's how I felt building this baby and birthing it. But the Faithpreneur TV network is for people who have products and services that they're creating in every discipline, because my faith tells me there's nowhere where God is not. So to see the heart of Gayla and to see the heart of Victoria just opening up this platform so we can learn about others who are doing amazing things and we can sow into that. That is what my mission is all about. And having this platform where we can have Wocstar Media, we can have Ron, we can have everybody just sharing in the space that we're unapologetic about the fact that it's beyond grit and determination as an entrepreneur. It's about walking it out through the faith that you know you can see what you can't see and make it happen on biblical principles. So I get really excited about it, but I'm excited about you, Ron, and I'm looking forward to connecting and hearing more about how we can support. I wish I didn't have the distraction today so that I could have, really tuned in without having to step away. But I just want to honor this space and everyone that's here that I don't know, because Gayla, you just exemplify what grace means, right? Because you're always thinking about, how do I help somebody else? How do I invest in another business, another opportunity that's going to add value? And I just want to honor you for being you. And just thank you for inviting me in the room. And I'm great. It was wonderful to meet you, Victoria, and everyone's here, because I don't believe in accidents. So I believe that this is divinely ordained, that you started this lunch and learn opportunity, because we don't know what's going to come out of this. And I strongly believe in 2024, all of us are going to get more. And if my faith tells me that I believe in a God that's the head of the universe, why should I have less than those who don't even believe he exists? Where they do that at? So yeah, so Faithpreneur TV, we are on. We have to build this out. The industry hasn't seen it this way. I know I'm a disruptor, and I'm okay with that, because I'm God's child and his 21st century media ambassador. So I can't wait to come back and talk about it. But I just wanted to get off camera, come on camera, to say, Gayla, every time I'm in your presence, every time you curate spaces, it is just an example of what a gift you are. And I just want you to know, from my mouth, and I'm sure everybody else here, we honor you for being the blessing and the connector that you are, and that you get double above anything you could ever imagine or think, because your heart is pure. And you're doing this because you really believe in everybody winning. A lot of people say, oh, bring them to the table, let's talk. You really want to see it move, and you want to see Ron have success. That's why you talked to Victoria. That's why you curated this. And I just honor you in this moment. We don't pause enough to honor one another when we invite others into the room to strategize about success, because I believe in win-win models. No one has to lose if we do it from the right place. So I love you. I thank you. Sorry I have to run, but I look forward to the next opportunity that I can share in this space. And I hope you all have a blessed weekend. And I hope the weather for those on the East Coast can act right, because we've had some sprinter going on. And I said, Jesus, we need to have a conversation, because it's supposed to be spring. But have a beautiful one. And I look forward to connecting again soon.
I love it. I mean, all I could say is amen, right? Like, I just feel like, amen.
Yeah.
I do want to leave you guys with this call to action. Now, these lunch and learns are going to be monthly. We'll get out the calendar for the next couple. But can I give you all a little homework? And through the email, whether you got this through the MailChimp email, all of you got an email, I believe, from us. Can you shoot back an email of 2 ideas of how you think we as a group can start to uplift creatives, how we can start to think about the larger system, right? So 1, how we can uplift individuals and folks like the Rons of the world and the Nikkis of the world. And then can you give us 1 idea of what is in your around how we should think about the system as a whole? I would love, love, love if you guys could take that on as homework. And then, excuse me, I'm really losing my voice. And then let's maybe on the next Lunch and Learn start to really unpack those. Because I want to get us to get from educating each other and sharing and hearing about the different types of creatives that are out there and opportunities to then activating, because you guys have the answers and solutions, right? You guys are in this space. You guys are in corporations. You guys are at theaters. You guys are at foundations. You guys are at your own companies, right? You're entrepreneurs. So I truly believe that the answers and some of the ideas are sitting within our group here. And so I want to get to activating.
This has been amazing. You guys are awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ron. for your
Thank
time
you,
today.
Ron. Like we said, to learn about your world, it's been really cool. So thank you.
This has been amazing. You guys are awesome.